You bought the house, the Apache woman said. You did not buy the dead beneath it. Ethan Hale stood with one boot on the porch step and a hammer still raised in his hand. The first nail he had driven into Red Willow Ranch had barely settled into the wood. Now a black mare waited 20 feet from the porch, steam curling from its nostrils in the cool evening air, and the woman beside it watched him as if she had been expecting this moment for years. Wind moved through the empty corrals. It carried the smell of dust, sun-baked pine, and rain somewhere beyond the hills. Ethan lowered the hammer. The woman wore a faded blue riding coat over earth-colored Apache clothing. Her dark hair was braided tightly against the wind, and a narrow silver bracelet circled her wrist. Nothing about her looked uncertain. My name is Ethan Hale, he said. I bought this place 3 days ago. I know. Her eyes moved past him toward the eastern side of the ranch, where an old cottonwood leaned over a patch of hard ground. Then you know I have the deed. Ethan reached inside his coat and touched the folded paper. It was the only thing he owned that still looked new. Silas Mercer had handed it to him 3 mornings earlier, smiling as though he had done Ethan a kindness. $800 for a ranch with a broken roof, a dry well, and enough empty land to make a lonely man feel smaller than a fence post. The townspeople had laughed when Ethan paid. A ranch abandoned for 12 years, they said, was not a bargain. It was a warning. The woman dismounted. Her boots touched the earth softly. She bent, gathered a handful of dirt, and placed it on the porch beside Ethan's deed. Men in town sold you boards, fences, and a roof that leaks, she said. They sold you silence. Ethan studied her face. And what are you selling me? Nothing. She looked again toward the cottonwood. I came to see what kind of man bought this place. The words settled heavier than they should have. Ethan had spent most of his life being measured by men with money, land, and louder voices. He had never cared much for their judgment. Hers was different. It felt older. Somewhere inside the house, a loose shutter struck the wall once, then stopped. Ethan glanced toward the eastern hallway. The room at the end had been locked when he arrived, though Mercer claimed every key had been lost. What is beneath that tree? Ethan asked. For the first time, the woman's expression changed. Not fear. Grief held so tightly it had become stillness. My mother, she said. The wind dropped. Even the mare went quiet. Ethan looked at the hard earth beneath the cottonwood, then at the deed in his hand. Mercer said there was no family. Mercer says many things. She stepped closer to the porch, but did not cross its shadow. My name is Naomi Red Feather. Before sunrise, men will come here and tell you I am lying. They will ask you to send me away. Ethan's fingers tightened around the paper. Why before sunrise? Naomi looked toward the eastern room. A faint metallic sound came from beyond its locked door. Something rolled beneath the floorboards and stopped. Because, she said, they know what this ranch is about to remember. The sound beneath the floor came again, soft as a spoon tapping the inside of a tin cup. Ethan turned toward the eastern room, but Naomi did not move. She watched him instead, weighing the distance between suspicion and sense. That door was locked when I arrived, he said. It was locked before you were born. A pale line of lightning flickered beyond the western hills. The storm was still miles away, yet the air had already changed. Dust lifted in thin ribbons across the yard. Ethan looked at the cottonwood, then at the woman standing beside his porch. You have until the rain starts, he said. Tell me why Mercer lied. Naomi rested one hand on the black mare's neck. Because men believe an empty place belongs to whoever writes his name on it first. Her voice carried no anger. That made the words heavier. 3 days earlier, Ethan had ridden into Dry Creek with $900 in his pocket, a tired sorrel horse, and no intention of staying. He had spent 14 years working cattle from Kansas to New Mexico territory, sleeping in bunkhouses that smelled of coffee, sweat, and old leather. He had saved little, not because he was careless, because wages disappeared quickly when a man refused to look away from unfairness. His last employer had dismissed him after Ethan spoke against a foreman who withheld pay from migrant ranch hands. The foreman kept his position. Ethan kept his name. In Dry Creek, Silas Mercer found him studying a weathered notice outside the land office. Red Willow Ranch. 800 acres. House, barn, pasture, and water rights included. Price reduced for immediate sale. Mercer wore a black coat too fine for the season and a smile polished smooth by practice. No family, he had said. No heirs. No trouble. Ethan should have questioned the price. $800 was less than the cost of a good breeding bull. But a man who had spent years being told where to sleep could mistake a door of his own for freedom. Ethan paid with nearly everything he had. The townspeople watched him sign. Some smiled into their coffee. Others looked away. One old clerk named Thomas Bell opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it when Mercer placed a hand on his shoulder. Ethan remembered that now. He remembered the silence more clearly than the laughter. Thomas Bell knows something, Ethan said. Naomi's gaze sharpened. He knows enough to be afraid. Another metallic scrape came from the locked room. This time, Ethan heard something roll beneath the boards and stop near the wall. The first drops of rain struck the porch, darkening the dust one circle at a time. Naomi looked toward the road. Far beyond the fence, two lanterns moved through the gathering dusk. Behind them, outside the reach of either light, another horse traveled without a lamp. Mercer? Ethan asked. Not the first two. Ethan stepped down from the porch and lifted the wooden bar from the gate. He did not reach for the old revolver at his hip. Naomi noticed. You trust strangers easily. No, Ethan said, watching the lanterns approach through the rain. I just learned not to trust the man who sold me silence. The first rider reached the gate beneath a steady curtain of rain. It was Thomas Bell. The old clerk sat narrow in the shoulders beneath a gray coat, with a lantern hanging from one hand and a leather case tied behind his saddle. A younger man followed him, leading two pack mules loaded with cedar boards, lamp oil, rope, and a small iron stove. Ethan recognized Thomas at once. Outside the land office, the old man seemed smaller, as though the town had been holding him upright. You should not have come here, Thomas said. He was not speaking to Ethan. Naomi stepped beneath the porch roof. Water shone on her braids and darkened the cloth at her shoulders. You should have spoken 3 days ago, she replied. Thomas lowered his eyes. The storm filled the silence for him. The younger rider introduced himself as Samuel Pike, a carpenter from 2 counties north. He had been paid to deliver the supplies whenever Red Willow Ranch gained a lawful resident again. Ethan examined the receipt. It bore his name, though he had ordered nothing. Who paid for this? Samuel pointed to the seal pressed into the paper. Red wax. A willow tree above a narrow stream. Thomas went pale. That seal belonged to Abigail Red Feather, Naomi's mother. Ethan saw the names settle between them. A dead woman ordered lumber. The money reached me 11 years ago, Samuel said. The instructions said to wait until someone lived here lawfully again. Thomas sent word after you signed the deed. Ethan looked at the old clerk. Thomas gripped the leather case. I thought repairs might keep you here long enough to learn the truth. No one spoke for several breaths. The ranch seemed to listen with them. Ethan brought the lantern inside. Naomi followed but stopped before the eastern hallway. Do not open that room tonight, she said. The roof may not hold through the storm. Then we brace it. You do not understand. That is becoming familiar. They found spare beams in the back shed. Naomi carried one in without being asked. Together they crossed the dark house while Thomas held the lantern and Samuel cleared rotten boards from the passage. The eastern door was oak, stronger than anything else in the building. 3 symbols had been carved near the latch: a willow branch, a rising sun, and a small circle divided down the middle. Ethan pressed his palm against the wood. Warm air slipped through the frame. Not wind. Air from a hidden space. Naomi noticed dust moving near the threshold. There was no cellar here, she said. My mother would have told me. Ethan crouched and found scratches around the lock, fresh enough that pale wood showed beneath the grime. Someone had tried to enter recently. The metallic sound came again. A silver bead rolled through a narrow crack and stopped against Ethan's boot. Naomi bent toward it. Her hand froze inches above the floor. The bead matched the bracelet on her wrist. Outside, beyond the lantern glow, the third rider dismounted near the cottonwood. He had traveled without a light. He walked directly toward the eastern wall, as though he already knew where the hidden room ended. Thomas saw him through the rain-streaked window. Mercer. Mercer reached the eastern wall just as Ethan stepped onto the porch. Rain streamed from the banker's black hat, but his coat remained buttoned neatly, as though weather had no right to touch him. He carried a brass key between 2 fingers. That room belongs to the bank, Mercer said. Ethan looked at the key, then at the deed inside his coat. The bank sold me the house. The bank sold you what was listed. Mercer's smile appeared slowly. Some things were never listed. Naomi came to the doorway behind Ethan. The silver bead rested in her palm, bright against her rain-darkened skin. Mercer saw it. The smile vanished. Only for a second. Thomas Bell and Samuel Pike stood deeper in the hall, silent beneath the weak lantern light. "You brought company," Mercer said. "The storm drove them in," Ethan replied. "Storms have a habit of uncovering what sensible men leave buried." Mercer stepped toward the eastern corner, but Ethan moved into his path. No threat, no raised voice, just a man standing where another man expected empty space. Mercer stopped. "You paid $800 for a failing ranch," he said. "Do not mistake that for authority. I paid for every door." Ethan nodded toward the brass key. "So tell me why you kept one." Thunder moved across the hills, low and distant. Mercer studied him, measuring poverty against pride. "That room is unsafe. The floor has settled. The wall could give way." Naomi closed her fingers around the bead. "Then why did you ride through rain to open it?" Thomas opened his leather case. Inside lay a brittle ledger, 2 sealed envelopes, and a folded map tied with blue thread. "Because the room does not hide a weakness," Thomas said. "It hides a record." Mercer's eyes hardened. "Close that case." Thomas did not. His hands trembled, but the ledger remained open. On one yellow page, Ethan saw 13 names written in 2 columns. Some were English, others were Apache. At the bottom stood the same divided circle carved beside the eastern latch. Naomi stepped closer. "That was my mother's mark." Samuel examined the carved symbol. He fitted the silver bead into the divided circle. It did not open the door. Instead, a thin wooden cover shifted beneath it, revealing a concealed brass keyhole. Mercer had gone still. Ethan noticed. He held out his hand. The key. For a moment, Mercer did not move. Then Thomas spoke. "If the room belongs to the bank, there is no reason to fear witnesses." Mercer placed the brass key in Ethan's palm. Samuel braced the sagging ceiling. Ethan turned the key. The lock resisted, then released. The oak door opened less than an inch, breathing out air that smelled of cedar, dry paper, and old smoke. The warped floor inside sloped toward the hallway. Samuel reached into the darkness with an iron hook and pulled a small box into the lantern light. On its lid, beneath 12 years of dust, someone had written 2 names. Abigail Red Feather. Silas Mercer. The elder man. The banker's father. No one touched the iron box at first. Rain pressed against the windows, and the lantern flame leaned toward the open room as if drawn by the dry air inside. Ethan crouched beside the box and brushed away the dust with his sleeve. The 2 names remained clear. Abigail Red Feather. Silas Mercer. Naomi stood over him, the silver bead still resting in her hand. "My mother never spoke his name." Mercer answered too quickly, "Because there was nothing worth speaking of." Thomas Bell looked at him. "Your father signed every page in that ledger." The banker turned toward the old clerk. "You are confused." "I have been afraid," Thomas said. "That is not the same thing." Samuel eased the eastern door wider while Ethan held the ceiling brace steady. Beyond it lay a narrow room lined with cedar shelves. Bundles of paper rested beneath oilcloth. A child's blanket sat folded in one corner. On the far wall were handprints made with clay, one large and pale, one smaller and reddish-brown. Between them, several prints no larger than a child's palm. Naomi crossed the threshold. Her breath changed. She said nothing. Ethan lifted the lid of the box. Inside lay a sealed letter, a silver bracelet broken at the clasp, and a map marked with a blue line running from the northern ridge to the dry well. Mercer moved closer. "Those papers belong to my family." Ethan placed one hand on the lid. "Then you can explain why they were hidden in my house." "Your house exists because my father allowed it." Naomi picked up the bracelet. It matched the one on her wrist, except for several missing beads. Her thumb passed over 3 engraved letters. Abigail Red Feather. Thomas opened the ledger to its final page. "The ranch was placed under a shared covenant," he said. "Ownership of the house and pasture could pass from one lawful resident to another. But the northern spring, the burial ground, and the eastern road were protected for 13 families. No owner could close them. No bank could claim them." Ethan touched the deed inside his coat. "That language is not in what I signed." "It was removed," Thomas said. Mercer's voice sharpened. "Be careful." Thomas finally met his eyes. "I was careful for 12 years. That is how the truth stayed buried." Lantern light appeared beyond the front windows. Then another. Hooves slowed outside the gate. By the time Ethan reached the porch, 6 townspeople stood in the rain beside Sheriff Amos Creed. Silas had summoned them before riding to the ranch. The sheriff removed his hat and held up a folded order. Ethan Hale, I am here to inspect a claim of unlawful entry and missing bank property. Behind him, more lanterns approached along the road. Naomi came to Ethan's side with the broken bracelet in her hand. Mercer stepped onto the porch wearing his smile again. There, he said softly. Now we will see whose story this town prefers. Ethan looked at the sheriff, then at the hidden room behind him. He opened the front gate. Come inside, he said. Everyone hears the same truth. The sheriff entered first, carrying rain on his shoulders and doubt behind his eyes. Amos Creed was a broad man with silver at his temples, but his authority seemed smaller inside the old house. The townspeople crowded near the doorway, hats in hand, boots dark with mud. Ethan left the gate open, as though the storm itself deserved to hear the truth. Thomas placed the ledger on the table. Naomi set the broken bracelet beside it. Mercer remained near the stove, composed again. This woman entered private property, he said. She removed family records and encouraged Mr. Hale to interfere with bank holdings. Sheriff Creed unfolded the order. Miss Red Feather, do you claim ownership of this ranch? Naomi looked at Ethan before answering. No, a murmur moved through the room. Mercer smiled. Ethan did not. Then why are you here? The sheriff asked. To protect what was never offered for sale. Thomas read the covenant aloud. The words were plain. The house and pasture could be sold. The northern spring, burial ground, and eastern road belonged to no single owner. They were to remain open to 13 families, their descendants, and any traveler in need of water. Sheriff Creed examined the signatures. This seal is old. The county copy is older, Thomas said. I filed it myself. Mercer stepped forward. And yet no such copy exists. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment. Because your father ordered me to remove it. The room went still. That is a serious charge, Creed said. It is a serious memory. Thomas removed a narrow receipt stamped by the Territorial Records Office in Santa Fe. It carried a date, registry number, and the title of the covenant. I kept this because I knew fear would not excuse me forever. Mercer studied the paper. A receipt proves something was filed. It does not prove the document survived. Naomi unfolded the map from the iron box. The spring still runs, she said. Your father's men blocked its channel 11 years ago. Sheriff Creed looked toward Mercer. Why? To make the ranch appear worthless, Ethan answered. Then the bank could reclaim it when the buyer failed. Thomas pointed to a clause buried near the bottom of Ethan's deed. The new owner had 90 days to restore profitable water access. Failure meant repossession without refund. $800 had not bought Ethan a beginning. It had rented him a loss. The townspeople began reading the documents over one another's shoulders. Mercer's influence weakened with every quiet breath. Sheriff Creed lowered the order. This property is now under formal dispute. Nothing leaves this house, and no permanent work continues on the protected land until the territorial office reviews the claim. Mercer turned toward the door. By the time Santa Fe reviews anything, the railroad survey will be complete. Naomi looked up sharply. Thomas gripped the table. The survey crosses the spring. Mercer stopped beneath the porch lantern. Lightning revealed wagons moving along the northern ridge nearly 2 miles away. Small lights flickered beside stacked wooden crates. Samuel stared through the rain. Those are blasting charges. Naomi looked toward Ethan. My people brought proof before, she said. Proof never mattered until a landowner chose to see it. Ethan folded the deed and placed it beside Abigail's bracelet. Then we are done arguing about paper. They will reach the ridge before dawn, Naomi said. Ethan took the lantern from its hook. So will we. Ethan saddled the sorrel while Samuel loaded lanterns, rope, and tools into a supply wagon. Naomi mounted the black mare without wasting a motion. Sheriff Creed ordered 2 townsmen to bring shovels, then faced the others gathered beneath the porch. Anyone who comes rides as a witness. No one comes looking for trouble. The rain softened to a cold mist as they left Red Willow. Hooves pressed deep into the muddy road. Lantern lights swayed across sagebrush and wet stone, while the northern ridge rose ahead like a dark wall against the fading storm. Mercer rode apart from them. He said little. That worried Ethan more than any argument. A man who had lost control of a room often searched for another place to regain it. Halfway to the ridge, Naomi turned from the road and followed a narrow trail between two stands of juniper. "The wagons cannot climb that way," Creed called. "They do not need to," she answered. "The water does." Ethan followed her. Thomas rode behind him, gripping the saddle horn with one hand and Abigail's map with the other. The trail climbed nearly 300 feet before opening onto a shallow basin hidden from the road. Moonlight touched rows of irrigation channels, storage sheds built low against the earth, and a small herd of horses sheltered beneath cottonwoods. Lamps appeared one by one. Men, women, and children stepped from the sheds in silence. Some were Apache. Some were homesteaders whose families had signed the old covenant. All of them knew Naomi. Ethan looked across the living valley. This ranch was never empty. The house and front pasture were abandoned, Naomi said. The valley was not. An older Apache man named Daniel Red Feather approached with a wooden box of tools. He was Naomi's uncle and one of the descendants listed in the ledger. For 11 years, the families had kept seed dry, cleared hidden channels, and watched the spring from beyond the ridge. They had waited for a lawful resident who would honor the covenant. "Why did you not come forward sooner?" Ethan asked. Daniel looked toward Thomas. "We did." The old clerk lowered his head. No one shamed him. That silence carried more weight than accusation. Naomi spread the map across a flat stone. The blue line ended beneath the survey camp, where hired crews had stacked blasting powder near a limestone shelf. The spring ran directly below it. Mercer intended to redirect the water toward railroad property before daylight, before anyone in Dry Creek could witness what the work would change. Sheriff Creed studied the map. Mercer knew. His father designed the plan, Thomas said. Below them, a bell rang from the survey camp. Men moved between the wagons. Lanterns climbed toward the marked shelf. Ethan looked at the families in the basin, then at the townspeople arriving behind the wagon. Two groups taught to distrust each other now stood beneath the same wet sky, watching one source of water. Ethan handed his revolver to Sheriff Creed. "Hold this." Creed frowned. "Why?" Ethan picked up a shovel. "Because I need both hands." Naomi lifted another. Together, they began clearing the oldest channel toward the spring. Daniel joined them. Then Samuel. Then Thomas Bell. One by one, the townspeople stepped forward. Mercer remained on his horse, alone at the edge of the lantern light. From the ridge above came the scrape of a match. Naomi stopped digging. Sheriff Creed's voice crossed the basin, calm and final. "Put out that flame." The flame disappeared. For one long moment, no one on the ridge moved. Then a young survey worker lowered the match and stepped away from the wooden crates. Sheriff Creed climbed the slope slowly, his empty hands visible in the lantern light. "No charge is to be set," he said. "This ridge is now a protected disputed site until the territorial office reviews the covenant and water claim." The foreman looked toward Mercer. "We have orders." "You have wages," Creed answered. "Orders belong to the man who signed them." Mercer urged his horse forward. Mud clung to the animal's legs, and the banker's polished coat had finally lost its shape beneath the rain. "This is railroad business," he said. "You have no authority to stop lawful work." Thomas raised the registry receipt. "The proposed work crosses protected land." Mercer looked across the basin and saw what had changed. Apache families stood beside townspeople. Farmers held shovels. Carpenters held lanterns. No one shouted. No one reached for a weapon. They simply remained where he had expected them to scatter. Ethan drove his shovel into the channel again. The packed earth broke beneath the blade. Naomi worked beside him, guiding the trench toward a narrow seam of wet stone. Daniel knelt and pressed his fingers into the soil. "It is close." More hands joined them. A widow from Dry Creek cleared roots with a garden spade. Samuel reinforced the channel walls with cedar scraps. Even the young survey worker came down from the ridge and carried away loose rock. Mercer watched his hired men follow. One after another, they left the charges where they lay. Not from fear, from choice. That was the first thing he could not purchase. "You are throwing away a fortune," Mercer called. Ethan paused. "A fortune for whom?" Mercer said nothing. The answer stood around him. Thomas opened the ledger beneath a canvas sheet and read the 13 family names aloud. After each name, someone in the basin answered. Some voices were old. Some belonged to children. When Abigail Red Feather's name was read, Naomi placed the broken bracelet on the flat stone beside the map. "Present," she said softly. Ethan returned to the trench. His shovel struck a buried piece of iron. Daniel and Naomi cleared the mud by hand, revealing a stone gate built into the old channel. The divided circle symbol had been carved above it. Ethan held the silver bead against the mark. It matched exactly. Daniel dug beneath the symbol and uncovered a rusted retaining pin. Together, Ethan and Naomi wrapped rope around the pin while Samuel loosened the surrounding stone with a pry bar. They pulled. The pin shifted. At first, only a thin thread of water appeared. It moved darkly through the dust, uncertain after 11 years underground. Then the old gate opened. Clear water poured into the channel, curled around Ethan's boots, and ran toward the basin. No one cheered. The sound itself was enough. It passed from one trench to another, touching dry roots, filling old grooves, and carrying the smell of cold stone and cedar into the dawn air. Sheriff Creed removed the blasting order from Mercer's hand. "This camp is closed." Mercer looked toward the road, but no rider waited for him. Naomi lifted the bracelet from the stone. "I could have challenged your purchase the day you signed," she said. Ethan looked at her. "Why did you not?" "Because paper could tell me who bought this place." Her eyes returned to the water. "Only tonight could tell me who would keep it." By sunrise, the water had reached the dry well at Red Willow. It did not rush. It arrived quietly, filling the stone basin inch by inch while the first light spread across the pasture. Ethan stood beside it with mud on his boots and both hands resting on the shovel handle. Naomi watched the surface rise until it reflected the cottonwood, the broken porch, and the pale roof of the house. For the first time since she had ridden into the yard, her shoulders eased. Sheriff Creed returned from the ridge with Mercer's papers beneath his coat. The survey camp had been sealed, the blasting charges removed, and a rider sent toward Santa Fe with Thomas Bell's registry receipt. Mercer left alone before the sun cleared the hills. No one followed him. 6 weeks later, the territorial office confirmed what the hidden ledger had preserved. The covenant was lawful. The spring, burial ground, and eastern road could never belong to one man. Mercer's sale remained valid, but the ranch was still bound by every term of the covenant. Ethan accepted that truth before the clerk finished reading it. Then he filed a new public water easement of his own. Any traveler, Apache or settler, could draw water without payment. Thomas Bell recorded the sentence with a steady hand. "You know this land will be worth far more once the railroad comes," he said. Ethan looked through the office window toward the road, where Naomi waited beside the black mare. "Then it ought to be worth something to more than one man." Red Willow changed slowly after that. Samuel repaired the eastern roof. Daniel reopened the old irrigation ditches. Families from the hidden valley brought seed, tools, and horses kept safe for 11 years. People from Dry Creek arrived with lumber and fence wire. Some came from kindness. Others came from shame. Ethan asked no one which feeling brought them. Work was work. By autumn, grass covered the northern pasture again. The 13 families used the eastern road openly. The cottonwood stood undisturbed, and beneath it Ethan placed a simple stone bearing Abigail Red Feather's name. No speeches were given. Naomi laid the broken bracelet at its base, then changed her mind. She carried it into the house and hung it beside the eastern door, where morning light could touch the silver beads. On the first cold day of winter, Ethan finished a new sign for the gate. He carved only the old name into the wood, Red Willow Ranch. Beneath it, in smaller letters, he added another line, "Water for every traveler." Naomi read the words twice. "You left your name off." Ethan set a tin cup on a hook beside the well. "The land had a name before I came." A wagon approached from the west. Its driver was a white homesteader with 2 tired children. From the eastern road came an Apache family leading pack horses. Both groups stopped at the well. For a brief moment, they regarded one another across the clear water. Then the youngest child reached for the tin cup and handed it to an Apache elder. The old man drank, filled it again, and passed it back. Ethan and Naomi stood on the porch without speaking. Smoke lifted from the chimney. Wind moved through the new grass. The ranch no longer looked